Metal Harbor has a lot more platforming than it did in its SA2 counterpart, which is pretty surprising because in SA2 the level was a little bit bland because it was just speed sections in a game that doesn't have the boost to make you feel really fast. You can see where this is going. Nothing but dash pads and scripted loop-de-loops. I mean, there was occasional variety. You would roll under stuff or jump into hangars that would automatically bring you upwards and you weren't doing anything. But at least here there's a lot more precise platforming. It definitely feels like more of a challenge going through it legitimately without flying over it all the time. But it can also feel kind of nerve-wracking because of that. You really gotta trust your homing attack. Like, you really gotta trust that the homing attack can actually send you further than you think, and it can even send you upwards. Like, I don't honestly know why people complain about that in 06. You'd think that it would just be seen as more convenient, because you can trust it more to hit the target. And it's like, it's a gravity-defying homing attack, but isn't the homing attack by definition gravity-defying anyways? Sonic should just be falling straight down. I don't really see the point of arguing for literally realistic physics in a game like this. But I think it would have been less nerve-wracking having to rely on the homing attack in plenty of difficult homing attack chains if the game had a targeting reticule. Because then I'd always know when exactly my homing attack won't fail. There's also a lot more enemies to deal with, including shield bots. I was expecting the shield gimmick to be restricted to the egg pawns because you only really dealt with shield enemies in Heroes. I haven't played 06, so maybe you dealt with them there too. But either way, you just homing attack the gun bots with shields twice, and that's it. So easily the most memorable part of this level is the underwater area. A lot of fans were wondering why we've never had an underwater area in 3D. Unfortunately, there's no platforming here whatsoever, so it's just a place where you get slowed down and you just stand and walk around normally. The only thing different is that, of course, there's a threat of drowning. And it's a lot more difficult to accurately position yourself to stand over the air bubbles and take them in 3D. So you have to keep that in mind. I actually died a lot here when I played this for the first time. On the second playthrough, it's not really a problem anymore though. You have to find switches in order to progress. But the level design looks pretty samey because it's just 4 hallways. So it can kind of, like, not 4 hallways necessarily, but they're at all 4 sides of you. So it can be kind of easy to get lost and lose track of where you are, and so it can be kind of hard to find the switches than it may think. And of course you can have shield robots hitting you from off screen because you're too focused on looking for switches and air bubbles. And speaking of robots, you'll also notice shell crackers here. And this got me thinking, there are actually a lot of shell crackers in this game. Why is it that one of the most infamous badniks in Sonic history is so common in this game? I mean, like, spamming the most annoying enemies in Sonic history is one of the things that one of the worst Sonic ROM hacks tends to do. Like Sonic the Hedgehog: The Lost Worlds. The first enemy you see in that game is a fucking shellcracker. Let that be a warning. I mean, it's not like the game is really bad when it comes to the enemies. It's just kind of weird when you finally realize there's actually a lot of shellcrackers in this game. They shoot their missiles at you from afar, and that can pretty easily hit you. So it kind of feels cheap like that. But yeah, Metal Harbor is a fun level. It's definitely a challenge. It's just that this was a fun level, just that it lasts like 5 minutes. And then there's Security Hall. Now, granted, this level isn't exactly liked in the original game, mainly because of the nerve-wracking 5-minute time limit. Unfortunately, the timed mission of this in this game has an even worse time limit, but at the very least you don't have to go into a whole room dedicated to opening certain rows of vaults, because for some reason they don't have all of the vaults open at once, like openable at once. In fact, all the vaults are open by default in Sonic World. I kind of miss that because I spent such a long time in multiplayer when I was a kid, opening every single vault just for the fun of it, because I was really bored that day. And you can't do that here, but honestly, it's ultimately better to have every vault open, because then if there's a red ring in one of them, which there turned out to be for the last one for me, you can just see it from a distance, and you don't have to go right up to the vault and open a whole bunch of them to find which one has the red ring in it. So, there's the positives. And now for the negatives that you can clearly see. The frame rate of this level is atrocious. At the end I realized that maybe it wasn't necessarily frame rate, but actually massive slowdown. Because you can clearly see Miles' Tails are moving very slowly when he's flying. And normally I don't really like his flying animation in this game to begin with, speaking of that, because, well, normally Tails' tails fly above him in a circle like a helicopter, because it's meant to be like a helicopter. In this game, Tails' tails just kind of spin around, like they don't actually look circular, they don't look like they should be flying at all. But that's a minor nitpick compared to the horrible frame rate that this level has, that is actively making the level a lot more difficult to play. Notice me trying to turn around and start moving the opposite direction and moving in a circle, and Rouge is just walking backwards. The game actively controls worse here. I honestly don't understand what is about this level that makes the frame rate so terrible. I mean, it doesn't even look phenomenally different. It doesn't even look phenomenally better than the original Security Hall. I mean, I think it looks a little nicer. But maybe I'm just conditioned to think that because it's in HD stuff. Rouge is just like Knuckles, but much better because she throws bombs as a projectile rather than having a shitty fire punch with such terrible range that with the camera behind him you can barely tell it's a projectile at all. Which is why I didn't think it was a projectile at first. But with Rouge, her bombs actually go farther away from her, so that combined with the large explosion that they create, it feels more reliable, and it looks a lot less stupid and doofy than dummy ring bombs. I mean, I know Tails threw a ring in Sky Patrol, but that was one ring. I think it would be more faithful to go with his Tails Adventure, throws actual golden bombs demonstration, I don't know. But yeah, Rouge is better than Knuckles, so not necessarily as a character, but it just would be a lot more fun to play if it weren't for the fact that the frame rate is terrible. I mean, it even feels like it alters the gameplay in glitchy ways. Sometimes I'm trying to climb onto a wall and it takes forever for her to grab onto it to climb it. And she automatically climbs upwards for a little while too, by the way. And it's to the point where at first I thought some walls couldn't be climbed at all, because it takes so long to grab onto them. And another thing is, I tried to spin dash through this enemy 3 times in a row, and it just wouldn't detect it. I clipped through it over and over again. I haven't tested this out to see if this happens all the time with this enemy, because that would be a really bad glitch. It just reminds me of how the physics in this game, aside from the badnik bounce stomping, which is another great thing about it, the physics in this game are actually kind of better than the adventure games in the sense that you can actually spin dash through enemies like you were always supposed to, because you could in the classic days. Because in Adventure 2, if you spun dashed into an enemy, then you would just awkwardly stop and uncurl. And you're not supposed to do that. That's like Sonic Blast levels of physics. So at the very least, when you spin dash through an enemy, you can just keep on going, and so it doesn't feel like a horrible idea to try to use the spin dash as an actual attack. And it doesn't lose all flow and momentum when you hit an enemy that happens to magically show up in your way. So that's good. But There's really nothing good about this level. Even the timed mission is ridiculous. Omochao, he kind of acts weird in this game in general because when you merely walk into him, instead of giving you advice, he just acts like you're hurting him. I know it's supposed to be a take that because people don't like Omochao, but it just kind of falls flat for me. It kind of feels like dude not funny because it kind of feels like he's acting like he's used to being abused and he's like traumatized to the point of being delusional, thinking that you're hurting him when you're just walking into him. I kind of feel bad for him, honestly. It doesn't help that he doesn't seem to have the smoking effect that happened in SE2 when you attacked him, where you lie on the ground and smoke would come out of him. Maybe I just haven't tested that out and I forgot, but it doesn't feel satisfying to do slapstick to something when you can't actually see that it's damaged from it. And Amy actually noticed finally, well not noticed, I was pointed out to, that Amy actually has a homie attack in this game. And I'm showing it off here. Apparently you're supposed to magically know that if you do the 06 double jump with Amy in this game, it'll magically turn into a homie attack to attack the enemy. So, she'll be way above the enemy, and then she'll immediately go into ball form and home downwards in on the enemy. How was I supposed to know that? So, obviously I didn't know that I could do the homie attack because it wasn't intuitive at all. She seemed to be just 06 Amy with that double jump. And she also reminded me of Mighty's double jump that leaves him vulnerable in Sonic Chaos Quest, one of the ROM hacks with the most boring level design ever made, where you just hold right. At least to me anyways, it reminds me of Sonic 2. So it's just not intuitive at all that Amy has the homie attack when that's how it works. But now that I know she does have the homie attack, she seems to be a lot better of a character to play. Better than Sonic actually. Because she's just Sonic with the homie attack. Glad I know that now. Another thing that bothers me about the Chao system is that you can't pet infinitely. You stop automatically pretty quickly. It sounds like a nitpick, but one of the things that I like to do in the Chao system in SE2 was just hold the pet button down and just keep holding it down. So it felt like the character was really bonding with Chao because he was just petting him for a really long time. But you can't even do that in this game. You just automatically stop really quickly. You also can't pet a Chao that's eating, which feels like a restriction. But it's a good restriction because petting the Chao when he's eating the Chao system normally just forces him to stop, and you don't really want that. Here's the real big problem. It's very easy to pick up the wrong thing, even when you're not facing it in this game. And while I'm assuming this just applies to the Chao Garden, I haven't tested that out yet, it just feels weird that they would decide to imitate the SE1 picking things up in the Chao Garden collision detection when everybody knows that that was terrible. That nobody liked feeling like it was completely random when you picked something up. Because you would pick up something you weren't even facing. I don't know, it just baffles me because this game was made way after SA1, so they don't really have an excuse for this kind of glitchy programming anymore.